fine. Okay, we'll get through it. Okay, so here, I'm just going to go through these. The first one is, let's see, AC is 24, my B is 25. So I need two numbers that multiply to 24. So that's like 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Okay, good. And to add up to 25. Well, the only ones that add to 25 are, is the first one. So I'm going to grab these two, 1 and 24. Right, so you need two numbers that multiply. A times C is 24. And plus B, that's 25. So that's going to be 25, 24 and 5. 24 and 1. Perfect. Now I'll do the, let's see, why don't I just alternate? I'll do factor by grouping in the first one, and I'll do box method in the second one. Everybody all right with that part? All right, so I'm going to rewrite this first one down here. So I'm going to rewrite it as, it is 3m squared. I'm just going to substitute in these two in for the 25m. So it's going to be plus 1m plus 24m, and then I finish with the last part plus 8. That's still there. Then we'll group them. So I'll have my first group, don't forget that, second group. So my first group is going to be, what can I pull out of 3m squared and 1m? I can pull out an m, and I'm left with 3m plus 1. And then don't forget the plus here. What can I pull out? 24m and 8. I can pull out 8. I'm left with 3m plus 1. So then I have m plus 8 times 3m plus 1. So those should be the answers you get no matter which method you did. You should have m plus 8 and 3m plus 1. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So then the next one we'll look at over here is going to be, let's see, 7 times 12 is negative 84, and the sum is negative 40. So, so let's see, 84, that plays 7 and 11. How about, see, I can take a 2 out of here. If I take a 2 out of 12, I can make it 14 and 6. Instead, I could have taken a 3 out of the 12 and made it 21 and take a 3 out of it and 4. Oh, and then this is factorable by 2, so I can do 2 and 42. Okay, now here's the tricky part. Since this is negative, that means I need to find the difference between them. It has to be negative, it has to be 40. So the difference between them is, these ones have a difference of 40 between them. Right, this means it has to be a difference. So the difference between them is 40. So I'm going to be using, that means, that's going to tell me that I need to use negative 84 and negative 40. This is my times, this is my plus. I need to use 2 and 42. That's what it tells me. One of them needs to be negative. Since the bottom is negative, negative 40, that means that the bigger one has to be negative. Whatever sign the bottom is, that has to be the sign of the larger one. Like Fox says, that's the one that dominates. Okay, so now I'm going to make my box. Here's my box. And I'm going to put in the first thing goes in the first spot, 7x squared. The last one goes in the last box, negative 12. And these two inside ones come from these guys, 2x and negative 42x. Now I'm going to factor out everything I can out for this first row. What can I factor out of the first row? I can factor out an x. What can I factor out of this bottom row? I can factor out a negative, let's see, 42 and 12, 6. Negative 6. What can I factor out of both of these two? 7x. Or if you're not sure, you can also do the whole, you can play this game. You can say, what times x gives me 7x squared? because these two need to multiply, these two, this one and this one need to multiply to give me 7x squared. So x times 7x gives me 7x squared. And then what can I factor out of these two? Well, it could be a 2 or a negative 2, so I have to kind of look at the sign here. What times x gives me 2x? Oh, 2. And then double check to make sure that, double check your signs, make sure that this one times that one gives you this one. So sign-wise, we're good. 2 times -6 gives you -12, so I know that I'm fine, this totally works, and I have the right answer. So here we've got, right, this is the first one, 7x plus 2, and the second one is x minus 6. So no matter what method you did, that should be your final answer. Good? Okay, we'll go to the next one, or next two I should say. Here, let's see, 4 times -15 is -60, and b is -4. So 60 is, well, it's 1 and 60, it's 2 and 30, it's 3 and, I'm just kind of counting up, 3 and 20, it's 4 and 15, it's 6 and 10. And since this is a negative, that means I need to find the difference between them. So the difference between these two is 59, the difference between these two is 28, the difference between these two is 17, 11, 4. Oh, finally I get the one I want, 4. So that means that it must be 6 and 10. So 6 and 10, those are my spots. I need two numbers that multiply to -60 and add to -4. And it's going to be 6 and 10. Again, the larger one has to be the same size as whatever b is, because that's the one that dominates. So since I'm left over with -4, that means the bigger one has to be negative. So I'm going to go ahead and do my factor by grouping. So here we go. We have, what was my original thing? 4w squared. And then my last one's going to be -15. The in-between parts is going to be this 4w, -4w, which is going to come from these two. So it's going to be plus 6w minus 10w. Okay, good. Now I'm going to do the first group, circle the negative, and then the last group. So the first group, I can pull out a 2w. I'm left with 2w plus 3. And then I have the minus, which means I need to take a negative out of this one. Okay, I pull out of both of these, a 5. So it's going to be -5. If I take -5 out of this first group, I get positive 2w. If I take a -5 out of -15, I get a positive 3. And good, because these two are the same thing. So I have 2w plus 3 times what's left, 2w minus 5. So no matter which method you use, you should still get that answer. 2w plus 3 and 2w minus 5. Everybody got that?
Yeah.
Good. All right, so the next one, the last one, is, let's see, AC is -5. The sum of the B is 4. So let's see, well, two numbers multiplied to 5, all I have is 1 and 5, that's it. And that's good because since, again, this is a negative, it has to be the difference, and the difference of them is 4. So that's all good. Here's my little X here, maybe I'll use a different color. I'm going to do green maybe. So two numbers, again, multiply to -5 and add to 4, 1 and 5. And the 5 should be the positive one, right? Because the 4 is positive, so it means the 1 must be negative. All right, so here, I'm going to make my box. Here's my box. And again, the first one goes in the first one, -x squared. Last one goes in the last box, 5. And then these fellas here go into these other spots. Right, so I'm going to have -1x and 5x. Okay, great. So what can I pull out of negative x squared and negative x? I can pull out a negative x. And then negative x times what gives me negative x squared? X. And then what can I pull out of both 5x and 5? 5. And it gets a little tricky. What can I pull out of negative 1x and 5? Nothing, just 1. And then kind of double check to make sure that you have your signs right and something isn't split mixed up, because that can happen. So 5 times 1 gives me 5, so I know that I'm good. My signs are correct. So then I'm done. Negative x plus 5 times x plus 1. Now, you might also have gotten, if I multiply this by negative 1 times negative 1, and distribute 1 into 1 and 1 to the other one, this is the same thing as, so here's one answer, right? This is equal to this answer here, if I distribute negative 1 into each one of them. It's the same exact thing as x minus 5 times negative x minus 1. So that's the second possibility. Or some of you folks left the negative on the outside, so then you would have gotten x minus 5 times a negative sign and then an x plus 1 on the inside. So these are all equivalent. They're the same thing. So it doesn't matter which one, these are all exactly the same. It just depends on where you put your negatives. Yeah?
Say we just switch like the parentheses, say we put
Oh, it's like
plus
this.
1 first?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, either one is fine. Yeah. Yeah, same is true for all of these. You know, once you have them, 3 times 5 is the same thing as 5 times 3. So they're commutative. You can swap them around. It's all good. Let's see how we're doing on the time. Okay, we're all right. I'm going to go and pause it into the next part, and we'll move on down the page. So you have homework due doing more of these due on Monday. So I really urge you to work on those a little bit tomorrow. Try to do a few of them tomorrow, and then try to do a few of them, over the weekend, so that you get a chance to come back to them and refresh your mind on them.
You're talking about My Open Math or something you handed?
My Open Math.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to get to my favorite one, factoring the difference in 2 squares. So, oops. All right. So, difference in 2 squares. Am I mixing? Did I lose one? Are there only 3 on your example, or are there 4?
Yeah, 3.
Okay. Great. So, it's my favorite. How do you know? There's only 2 factors. Does everyone see these? Have a look at these. There's only 2 things. Does everyone see them? Yes?
Yes.
So there's 2. Are they both squares, perfect squares? Is this a perfect square of something?
No.
36m squared?
Yeah.
36 is a perfect square, it's 6 times 6.
Yeah.
M squared is a perfect square, it's m times m. Everybody on board?
Yeah.
How this one, is this a perfect square?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. 5 times 5 is 25, n times n is n squared. Everybody understanding?
Yeah.
So 2 squares, and then it's the difference between these squares. Difference means what? Add, subtract, multiply, or divide? Difference. Subtract. Difference is subtract. So it's minus. It cannot be plus, it has to be a minus. So you have 2 squares, and there's a minus between them. That's how you know that you have one of these spots. First of all, there's only 2 of them. They're both squares, and there's a minus between them. Good? So that's the first way of identifying it. So every time you see just 2, check and see if they're both squares. That would be my suggestion. Okay. Now, I explain why this works. So whenever we FOIL, we do the first. I multiply this by both these 2 pieces, and I multiply. Oh, wait. We'll do it this way. I multiply the firsts and the lasts, and then we have the inners and the outers. So the first and the lasts, the first gives me x squared, the last gives me negative, see one's negative, one's positive, everyone see that? Negative 6 times positive 6, that gives me negative 36. The inside, that gives me negative 6x, and the outside gives me positive 6x.
Those cancel.
Yeah, and they cancel out, exactly. Negative 6x plus positive 6x, those go away and make 0. So they just cancel each other out, and I'm left with x squared minus 36. So that's why this works. One has to be negative, one has to be positive. So where this comes from is, that's the beautiful thing. So if I have, everyone look up, if I have x squared minus 36, I can just write it just like this. The first one goes in the first spot, x squared, so in other words, what's the square root of x squared? X, what's the square root of 36? 6. So I'm going to put my x's in the first spots, my 6's in the last spot, 1 plus, 1 minus. Done. And you'll see that's exactly what we started with, x minus 6 times x plus 6. Okay, does everyone understand? Does everyone understand how I got from this part, x minus 6 times x plus 6 to x squared plus minus 36? So then now I can just factor it out. I know it factors out to this. We can do it right here. What's the square root of x squared? X. What's the square root of 49? 7. So you're going to make 2 parentheses. I'll put them off side so we have more room. X in the first one, first spots, 7 in the last spots, 1 positive, 1 negative. Doesn't matter which order. Done. That's it. How easy is that? Okay, everybody do the last 2. Then check with your neighbor. People got? So let's see. 4y squared comes from 2y. 81 comes from 9. So it's going to be 2y, 2y and 2y, 9 and 9, 1 plus, 1 minus. This one over here, 36m squared comes from 6m, 25n comes from 5n, so it's going to be 6m, 6m, 5n, 5n, 1 plus and 1 minus. You do it either order, doesn't matter. You do the minus first and then the plus, either one. Okay, good? All right, great. Let's move on. Correct your answers if you need to. And now we're going to use factoring to solve quadratic equations. All right, so this is great. Here's the problem. If I have something like 3x equals 2x minus 4, I can solve that for x, if they're all x's. But once I have an x squared, I can't solve that. So the neat thing is, we can take advantage of this really great property, which is that I know that if a times b times c equals 0, okay, everyone think about this. A times b times c equals 0. What do I know about one of those letters? A, b, or c?
It's gotta be 0.
One of them has to be 0. Does that make sense? So a times b times c equals 0. One of them has to be 0. So if I can factor them so they're all something times something times something, I know that one of them has to be 0. So I can set either one of those things to 0, and those will be a solution. So for example, this is something times something else equals 0. Does everyone understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Which means that I know that either x minus 3 has to equal 0, or 2x plus 1 has to equal 0. So how do I solve for this one? I'll draw my little lines down the middle. How do I solve for x minus 3 equals 0? I'm going to add 3 to both sides, right? And I'll end up with x equals 3. So if I put 3 into here, this becomes 0, and I get 0. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? If I put 3 in for x, I get 3 minus 3 is 0. 0 times anything is 0. So that works. How about this one here? This is a little bit harder. I need to subtract 1 from both sides. So then I'll get 2x equals negative 1. And then I'm going to divide by 2. So then I end up with,
Negative.
yeah, x equals negative 1/2. Great. And if I put negative 1/2 in there, I'll get this part equals 0. So something times 0 equals 0. So here are my answers. X equals 3 or negative 1/2. That would be my solution. How's everybody feeling about this? Okay? All right, so now we're going to make you do a little extra step here. First, you got to factor it. Then you get to pop it into these spots here. So we'll do the first, we'll work on the first one. Gotta factor that one. So two numbers that multiply to 6, they add to negative 5. Okay, so they multiply to 6. So since they multiply to 6, it's positive, that means they add to 5. So we're two numbers that add to 5. 2 and 3. So, and they add to negative 5, so they both have to be negative. Which means that we're done already. X minus 2 times x minus 3 equals 0. Because my a is 1. So now I can make these into 2. Everyone solve that. Solve for x. X has to be what? You can break these down into 2 separate equations. Right? That's the first one. Find the second one and solve them. That clock is a little bit fast. An extra minute. Does everyone understand how I got from here to there? Since my a is 1, I can just put them straight in. X minus 2, x minus 3. And equals 0. Because it equals 0, we have two things multiplying together giving me 0. So I need either the first one equals 0 or the second one equals 0. Okay, so here's the first one. So how do I solve this? I add 2 to both sides. I get x equals 2. The second one is x minus 3 equals 0. And again, I do the same thing. I add 3 to both sides. I get x equals 3. So my solution is x equals 2 or 3. Done.
Oh, so like, because in the double equation, 1 will be a 0, and if you were to have the other x be another number, even if when you multiply them together, the two parentheses, then you would still get 0.
Yes. So if this is 0, then I multiply together, I get 0. If this is 0, then I multiply together, I get 0.
And like if one is 0 and the other one's like 15.
Yeah,
0
doesn't
times
matter.
15 is still 0.
Exactly.
Okay.
Perfect. All right, have a good couple days. I will see you folks on Friday. If you have questions, our wonderful tutor will be in the tutorial center at 2:15 for a few hours. And she'll be bored if you'll come see her and ask questions.
We really get like the most amount of students coming in.
You do?
All students, yeah.
Oh, good. Are they mostly from our class or from other classes?
from other classes, from our class, or
Oh,
for
sorry.
I was tutoring an elementary school student